What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Paige with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my November wrap up. Hello my darlings, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be talking through all the books that I read in November. I ended up prioritizing clear your shit, and so I had a lot of prompts to fill, and I don't know how I managed to do this. Unfortunately, I did only read one book for the Australian Readathon, but I have plans in the works for next year to be able to participate wholeheartedly, and I'm very excited for that. So I'm going to talk through the statistics for the month and then dive into the individual books themselves. I'll also let you know what books were on my original death rolling TBR and if I completed them all or not. So in terms of statistics, I read 14 books in the month of November, which equated to 4,385 pages. This was 146 pages per day, which was a little bit on the lower side, and I did find I struggled to read throughout the month with moving, doing exercise, and filming and editing and all of that. My pages per book were 313, so a little bit on the smaller side, but that's okay. I had one book that was under 100 pages. I had one in the hundreds range, 3 in the 200s, 6 in the 300s, and 3 in the 400s. I did not read my big book, which was either The Unspoken Name or the 4th Vampire Academy, because I have decided to DNF Vampire Academy series and I have unhauled them. So for me, that was that. My average rating was a 4.32. I read a lot of genres. So I had 1 contemporary, 5 fantasy, 1 historical, 1 horror, 1 magical realism, 2 non-fiction, 1 paranormal, 1 romance, and 1 sci-fi. I listened to 2 straight audiobooks. I read 1 book physically. I listened to 1 audio and ebook combination, and I listened to 10 audiobook and read along with the physical copy. I read 1 middle grade, 3 YA, and 10 adult. I had 1 3.5 star, 7 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 4 5 stars. I read 4 standalones. I started 1 series, but it is caught up. I continued with 2 series. I caught up on 4 series, and I finished 3. I am so chuffed. My biggest book was Troy by Stephen Fry, which came in at 496 pages, so not far off that 500 page mark. And my smallest was A Dead Djinn in Cairo by P. Jelly Clark, and that was 47 pages. My listening hours was 44.4. And in terms of publication year, I had 1 between 2006 and 2010. I had 9 between 2016 and 2020, and 4 that were published in 2023. I am very happy with where my reading was, and I managed to get to a lot of ones that I really wanted to, so I'm very, very, very happy with how my reading went. Right, so into the books. The first book that I read was A Dead Djinn in Cairo by P. Jelly Clark. I was really struggling to get into my reading, and I thought this would kickstart me where I needed to, and I gave this a 4 stars. The main reason I picked this up was the Bookish Peeps Control My Life challenge. Jacqueline had set the challenge to read a book set in Cairo, and when I was reading Master of Djinn, I really wanted to see this connection because there was a reference to it in the book. And so it was really nice. It was very, very short, so I think that it gave a good taster of what the world could be and provided that little bit extra background, I suppose, to the characters, which was just really lovely, but it didn't blow me out of the water. I definitely enjoy the series, and I think the novellas are going to provide maybe just that little bit more context, but if you really like the characters in A Master of Djinn, I don't think that the novellas are going to disappoint. But I need to check it off. Just there. And there we go. Yay! The next book I picked up was the starting point for Clear Your Shit, and the fact that I was actually going to attempt it because I was still really struggling to get into my TBR, and I needed to read a book that was going to teach me something. I also wanted to read an Australian book because none of the other ones I had planned were Australian, and I picked up Beauty by Bri Lee. This is Bri Lee's discussion on the point of perfection and how we try and hold ourselves to this unachievable standard. I gave this 4 stars because Bri really struggled, and it was very challenging for them to be able to sort through their disordered eating habits and the excessive working out and finding that happy balance and feeling authentic in themselves. The thing that set this back for me was the fact that they talked about the element of African American hair and that impact, and African American women being held to a different standard. And I found that an interesting take because, like I said, Bri Lee's Australian, and it would have been cool to provide the opportunity for Aboriginal voices, which are also marginalised, and I think that was a missed opportunity given the context and the situation. But I can appreciate that Bri's just talking from their own experience, and that was one interaction that they had. It was all very superficial though, and very privileged lens in some aspects. Whilst it was quick to get through because it is so small, I think that there could have been a lot more nuanced in the writing, but totally understanding that what they are going through is so hard to be able to articulate, and when you are trying to combat a topic of disordered eating and the unattainable beauty standards, especially when you're thrust into the media front and center, it would be difficult. So 4 stars in the sense of, I think that there could have been improvement in the understanding behind this, but the message itself is definitely quite powerful, and it taught me a lot about disordered eating because that's not my experience with food, and so it was very eye-opening in that capacity. Next up, I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and this was the book that I was struggling with because I was trying to listen to it to and from work while walking to be able to get my steps up and listen while I moved. But I did complete it and I gave it 4.5. This was so harrowing and so uncomfortable to read. My audiobook also fucked up in repeating itself and going back to a different point on the next day when I was listening. So I got very confused, and the horror elements to this made it very hard to just listen to. I really needed to sit down with it and read it through because it wasn't one I could just listen while walking. I needed to pay attention to it. So I acknowledged that the reason this isn't a 5-star was because I wasn't aware of that going in. I also really struggle with animal death and graphic detail and descriptions of gore and that sort of component, which lowers my enjoyment rating, which, you know, is the main way that I critique books. So for that, it was just so hard. I really appreciate that it's there and it does what it does, but it just, for me as a person, that was a line that I was so uncomfortable while reading this. I'm so happy that I did get to this though, because it was one of my 5-star predictions for the year, and I found it really interesting, and I got to see a new perspective that I hadn't before, and I think it's very important in seeing horror done in a different way. Next up, I read Boy Erased by Gerard Connolly. I gave this a 4.5. I thought that this was a fictional take on someone's life, but going into it, I realized that this is actually a memoir. And oh good lord, did it hurt. This is following Gerard's experience in a conversion therapy program that's supported through the church. His dad's a pastor and he is outed as a gay man in just one of the most, not horrific in the sense of it was gory the way that it came out, but the betrayal that happened just hurt very deeply. I was so angry throughout this, and there was a lot of time throughout that I just wanted to ask a lot of questions, and it leaves me speechless every time I think about it because I know that this is a thing that happens. I know that this is not abnormal, but it hurts because I don't want that. As a queer person, I don't want anyone to have had to have gone through this, and the lingering effects that it has on your entire family and the dynamics and relationships. It's just, I haven't brought myself to watch the film. I think I will, but I need to give myself a little bit of distance because I don't need to see this represented in a visual format right at this point in time. It's still very fresh. I am very happy that I did manage to pick this up and that I did fly through it because I do think it is a very impactful read, and I would recommend people pick this up if they are okay to read this sort of content, because where they're at mentally, their relationship with religion and their family and the dynamics in this conversion program, just it's very hard for me to articulate because it is one of those non-fictions that have just gobsmacked me, and I cannot comprehend this book yet. I'm still sitting and reflecting on it because I just, the The next book that I read was Bookshop at the Back of Beyond by Amy Sparks, and I gave this a 4 stars. This is a catch-up, so I'm now up to date with the series, and I do feel like there will be more. This wasn't the ending. I just love being with these characters. It didn't have the same whimsical as the first two, but I still had a lot of fun with these characters, seeing what Nine gets up to, and the mystery of her mum and what's happening there has definitely ramped up in this one, and I feel like we'll continue to expand because there is a lot of secrets going on, and I find that really fun in a middle grade, just to make the intrigue more. Nine feels like a genuine kid in they wouldn't know what to do, so they're making the best actions that they can make. As an adult, it's probably not the best actions they could be taking, but I'm excited to see their growth, and it is just very wholesome, and I needed it after Boy Erased. Next up, I ended up selecting Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This I gave 5 stars. It shouldn't have surprised me because it was Erin's recommendation for Bookish Peeps, but it just caught me by surprise. The slice of life and telling this woman's story as she grows up to at the current point where she's trying to look after these 2 children that spontaneously combust was just something so different and unique. I think that it plays well into the conversation of privilege without hammering at home or being too on the nose with it, and the nature of difference and weird. It was just exceptionally crafted and very entertaining. It didn't feel heavy, and these kids have been through so much, and the way that Lillian is just wanting to protect them because she understands them really just hit home into why I was so passionate about teaching and supporting kids. And so that was really nice to have it reflected in such a different way. So thank you, Erin, for putting this in my hands. Your recs are always absolutely fucking solid. I'm very surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a 4 or a 5 star, and then I've picked it up and read it and just breezed through it. It was just so interesting in the dynamics of it, and then also the conversations at the end were just perfection. So very happy to have read this, and with that I need to check it off. Right, there we go. Yay! So that's that row. Oh my god, it's all coming together. This vlog was the inspiration for joining in Mare's collaboration video of finishing off our goals for the end of the year. There is a vlog coming out on the 12th that is that video, and my main purpose was to finish this. Before we continue on with the books themselves, I'm actually going to mark this off and this off, because in that vlog I did message Mare to do a Christmas book exchange, and then I also made a Korean meal. So I'm gonna put my little stickers on and have this completed. So feel free to keep an eye out for those to see how we end up getting to this point though. Meredith. This makes me so happy. I did it. This can go away. But I'm so thankful to Meredith for instigating that to be able to check off that goal. The next book that I read was Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake, and gave this 5 stars. Like, ha! I know that this is not the strongest one and not everyone is loving this, but I loved their dynamic. The fact that someone threw up in this and I still managed to give it 5 stars says a lot. I just fell in love with Stevie's character. I felt they were very relatable in a lot of ways, and Iris's determination and just personality were fabulous, and I really liked seeing their dynamic grow. I know that this isn't going to be the best one out of the series for a lot of people, but for me, the relationship of these two felt so much more organic to me. I'm so happy that I got to finish off the series, and it's beautiful. So I'm just a very happy chappy, because they're beautiful. Why is it that my favorite books always leave me speechless? Because I just can't articulate myself. My battery is going to die, so apologies if I just randomly cut out. The next book that I read was More Than We Can Tell by Bridget Kemmerer, which is the second in the Letters to the Lost series. And I wanted to have read Rev's story since Read Into the Letters to the Lost in 2016. Finally picked it up and so happy with that. I gave it a 4 stars because some of it was just a little bit too unrealistic. I know that teenagers be teenagers, and I definitely wish that I had have read this when I was a teenager, because there was a lot of components I related to with Emma and her online gaming and just that nature of it. But Rev's everything was why I went into this, and he delivered in every aspect that I thought it was going to. It is very hard hitting. He has suffered a lot of abuse, and his personal growth in this is amazing. His foster parents are just beautiful. Well, his foster to adoptive parents are beautiful, and just seeing his story was wonderful. I sort of feel like I didn't need him to have a romance, and Emma's characteristics were the failing point of this, because she was just like, whereas Reb is like, hey, I've been abused by my father for fucking years, and now learning to adjust and be a decent human being. And that contrast was very jarring, but I still loved Reb's aspects, and there were elements of Emma's that I really enjoyed as well. But it was just one of those things that I'm so happy that I finally picked this up, because it hit everything that I needed to. It just didn't become the same 5-star read that Letters to the Lost did when I originally read it. Speaking of whiny protagonists, the next book that I read was Summer by Ida McGuire, which is the third in the Beautiful Dead series. And holy lord, Dorina is doing my head in. I gave this 3.5. The normal is grey and narrow. Normal is not daring to look back. At night I dream in widescreen, high definition, technicolor. Holy shit. I'm not loving this series, but I'm still flying through it, and it's still fun. It's just not good. And I'm not going looking for good. I know the series as how it's presented in book 2 and 3. So I'm not going in for the next one, the fourth one and final one, going, oh, this is going to blow me out of the water. I'm just having fun. And it's definitely one of the easiest books to read. When I sit down, I can knock this over with very little effort. So it's very interesting because it is so just speedy. The mystery to it, so far-fetched, but I don't recommend these for high quality literature doing something different. It's 2010s, like fucking zombie angel things. Take it that way you will. I just know that I want to finish the series because for some reason I'm still having a fun time. Next up, I read Cemetery Boys by Eden Thomas, and I gave this 4 stars. I really loved seeing this dynamic. It was so beautiful. I was not in the best headspace when I was reading this, so it could be a me problem, but I also feel that the dynamic in this was just gorgeous. I'd really love to see more of the dynamics and just the beautiful Latinx culture and how it was so diverse and intricately woven was beautiful. I just found it interesting that there was a comment made of, do you really think you're the first trans person in Latinx culture? And they were like, oh. But I sort of hoped there could have been more trans joy in it, because the system actually allows for that to happen quite easily, in the sense that if you do your rights, then you are male. And that was confirmed, like at the very beginning of the book. So I think I might have gone in a little bit too critically for it, but it was overall a really fun mystery. I love seeing the representation both in the trans characters and the Latinx, and it was just beautiful. Like, it is a beautiful book, and I can understand why so many people fall head over heels in love with it. Next up, I read Only Humans by Sylvain Novelle, and I gave this 4 stars. This wasn't the strongest book in the series, but I just really loved the relationships with these characters. The second the audiobook started, I was like, yes, these people. I found it very interesting on the topics and the conversations that we're having about othering and alien. And the relationship dynamics had shifted so much from the first book, but understandably so much time had passed. I think it was very interesting in having the past and present merging together, and it sort of left me on a note of, oh. And I also found it interesting in the discussions of, after the second book and the consequences of that, how humans came back into where they were at, where they drew their lines and the boundaries. And the ending just surprised me, because I think it was very accurate to how it should be. there's also then the discussions of who gets to make those calls, and it was just a really fascinating read, so I'm very happy to have finished off this series. Then I picked up Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry and gave this 5 stars. I loved being back with these characters in the cute little bookshop that needed some love, and the fact that there is a skeleton called Satchel. It was interesting reading it knowing where Viv ends up, and sort of when they're trying to talk their way through things and it just being so different from how they are in Legends and Lattes. I will say that the epilogue to this does reference Legends and Lattes and why it was being told, but overall it's continuing in that very cozy vibe, and there is very low stakes as Viv is recovering from a wound and having to put a pause on being a mercenary and actually recover. It was really lovely getting to see them discover their love for reading as well, which is shaping them into the character that we know from Legends and Lattes. And the little creature in it is called Pot Roast, and it is an owl dog and absolutely adorable. Then I read Cruel Seduction by Katie Robert and gave this 5 stars. We know I'm a sucker for this shit. We've got the dynamics and there's just... So for this we are following Hephaestus and Pandora are friends, and Adonis and Aphrodite are exes. Hephaestus and Aphrodite married to convenience. Hi everyone. It's glorious. The way that Aphrodite and Pandora, I think I know that I'm a Sapphic girl at heart, because just everything about their dynamic was amazing. And I loved Hephaestus and Adonis sort of figuring out their dynamics. I don't know, there was something about Pandora and Aphrodite that it did things. I will say though, it can get very confusing because the characters adopt the title of the roles that they are in, so it's not always their name. So Aphrodite was originally Eris, and Hephaestus, I believe, was Theseus. So when they're referencing each other and going by not their title name, it can get very confusing. So that is one element to this that I'm starting to notice. The more that characters get introduced, the more people get roles, the names are shifting and it gets very messy. So I would definitely go in with a word of warning of that, but I love these characters so much. Yay! Okay. So, because I've never actually looked in the beginning of this book before, there is a whole map of who they are and their actual names. That will help if you ever struggle. I found it pretty easy to pick up, but also just if you're going through and reading this and going, what the fuck? That is why there is a reference. So if you're reading the audiobook for these, which like I do because they're amazing, if you can load it up on the web to just have it as a reference if you need it, then that will also help. But my ovaries. The audiobook narrator's just glorious. And then the final book that I read that I have no idea how the fuck I managed to fit this in the last day is Troy by Stephen Fry. This is telling of the story of Troy and various key players. I really appreciate these in making it actually digestible for laymen. I appreciate Stephen Fry also putting in their own commentary. At the beginning they're like, do not worry about the names and places and dates of all of this. The main things will crop up time and time again, enough for you to realize the importance of who they are. I'm just giving you all the backstory so you know how this has come to be. And I really appreciated that. For me, this was so much more digestible than any of the Iliad, the story of Troy. This was fantastic. And this was just randomized for Clear Your Shit. So I had no intentions of getting to it this month. I was actually planning on reading it next year for a video concept, but it's here now, so I read it and gave it 4 stars. I know that I'm inundated with Greek myth, Trojan war story elements, and I'm surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did, considering that I am so inundated, and for this year I feel like I could happily not touch another story of Troy for the longest time, which is also very entertaining because Olympus. But Stephen Fry managed to narrate me through it. I managed to get through it in a day and a half, and it was just very fascinating getting to hear it in a way that was actually digestible and sort of having a bit more of a discussion on different aspects to it, as well as saying things in a way that just make more sense, and or acknowledging the troublesome parts. Mention this catalogue of ships, and that's a thing that happens in it, rather than reiterating every single element to the catalogue and going into detail on that. It was a nice palatable version and a nice way to end off my month. And this also got me caught up on the Stephen Fry's mythology collection. So this plus Bookshops and Bone Dust, Cemetery Boys, and A Dead Gin in Cairo were the things that I read in November. Honestly, I have to admit that this was the most satisfying reading month once I got back into the swing of things with what I was ticking off, all the series completions, catching ups, clearing stuff off my TBR that should have been potentially unhauled but ended up being a fantastic read. It just felt really, really good. Let me know in the comments, what did you read in November? Do you have any thoughts on the books that I did read? It was a really diverse reading month and I liked it. It kept it fresh. I needed it. Thank you to Clear Your Shit for clearing out my shit. But yeah, let me know anything you want to let me know down in the comments below. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!